Have you ever had that moment when it feels like everything around you is falling apart? Like no matter how hard you try, life always finds a way to pull you down. Everyone has been through that. And that's where a powerful teaching comes in. In union, there is strength. It sounds like a simple phrase, but it carries a truth capable of transforming lives. Because when we are together, truly connected and not just in the same space, we can move mountains. I'm not just talking about physical strength. I'm talking about that strength that emerges when you and those around you put aside ego and competition to act as one. But what if I told you that at some point, unity is also tested? That it's not always easy to work as a team, and often things can fall apart just when we need each other the most? Now, imagine a flock of quails that needs to face exactly this situation. They are trapped in a cruel cycle, at the mercy of a hunter. But there's one detail. The key to their freedom lies in unity, or at least it should. However, not everything goes as planned. And the story I'm about to tell you is about how the strength of a community can mean everything, until the moment when pride enters the scene. Picture a man, an experienced hunter, who has learned to survive not through brute strength, but through cleverness. He is never in a hurry. Each step he takes is carefully calculated. The sun barely rises when he enters the forest, with a net slung over his shoulder and a whistle held tight on his lips. He doesn't hunt with violence. He doesn't chase down his prey. No, all he needs is a sound, a subtle and perfect call of a quail. Tweet, 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 tweet. The whistle is so precise that no quail suspects a thing. Like a familiar song playing in the distance, it seems a safe invitation. One by one, they approach, believing they're heading toward their kin. And when they're all gathered, perched and comfortable, he throws the net like a magician, revealing his trick at the perfect moment. The net covers them all at once. But the hunter's secret isn't just the net. He knows exactly what to do next. With an agile move, he steps on the edges of the net, pressing down to ensure no quail can escape. He acts quickly, without hesitation. They struggle, trying to flee, but now it's too late. Trapped and powerless, they have no choice but to wait while he gathers them all into a basket. He does this day after day. This cycle of capture and sale guarantees his livelihood. Every morning is a new hunt, every day a new full basket. And so, he lives comfortably, trusting in his skill and the predictability of the quails who always fall into the same trap. They always respond to his call. They always come, and he always wins. The hunter isn't in a hurry, because for him, it's a certainty of life. Just as the sun rises and sets, the quails will always be there, ready to be caught. Amidst that cruel and repetitive cycle, there was one different quail. She was not just an ordinary bird. She carried deep wisdom, as if she had lived many lives and understood something that the others had yet to grasp. This quail was, in fact, the future Buddha, reborn in that small and fragile body, but with an awakened mind. While the other quails spent their days in fear, wondering who would be the next victim of the hunter, he watched in silence. There was no despair in his eyes, only a calm that seemed to contradict the constant threat around them. Every morning, he saw his companions being lured by the same treacherous whistle and trapped in the net. And with each capture, he felt the pain of losing another. But instead of surrendering to fear or anger, he began to think. He knew the hunter was cunning, but he also understood something that no one else had realized. The hunter was strong only because the quails acted alone, each trying to escape by herself without collaborating. He knew there was a way out, but it would require more than just physical strength. It would demand trust, unity, and perfect synchronization. One calm morning, as the other quails gathered, he decided to speak. His voice was not authoritative or desperate. He spoke with serenity, and his words echoed like a profound teaching. Listen, there is a way for us to defeat this hunter, but it will only work if we act together. Next time he throws the net, don't try to escape individually. Instead, each of you should put your head through a mesh of the net. Then, all together, we will lift the net high and carry it to a safe place, where the hunter will never reach us. The other quails fell silent, reflecting. It was an audacious plan, perhaps even impossible, but the way he spoke, with that calm, gentle confidence, made them believe. For the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. Fear began to give way to courage, and suddenly, the idea of facing the hunter didn't seem so unattainable. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but together, they decided to try. The moment finally arrived. The familiar whistle echoed through the forest once more. Tweet, 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 tweet. The quails, anxious, felt their hearts race. They knew it was time to put the bold plan into action that the future Buddha had proposed. The hunter, as always, expected them to behave as they had every other day, each one for herself, struggling in vain beneath the net. He had no idea what was about to unfold. The net flew through the air and landed over them. The hunter smiled with that air of premature victory. It was just another easy day of work, or at least, that's what he thought. This time, instead of struggling alone, the little birds began to act as one. Each quail placed her head in a mesh of the net, exactly as planned. The moment was critical, and they needed to synchronize perfectly. A brief silence fell over the group. Then, as if an invisible force was guiding them all at once, they began to lift the net together. The hunter, perplexed, watched the scene unfold in disbelief. The net, which had once been a prison, was now floating above the ground, held aloft by the small heads of the quails. He tried to run after them, but it was already too late. In a matter of seconds, the net was being carried far away, crossing the clearing and disappearing into the trees. As the hunter ran after them, frustration mounted. He tried to reach for them, but the quails were determined. They flew with the net to a dense thicket of thorns, a part of the forest where the hunter could never enter without destroying his own trap. With one last collective effort, they dropped the net over the thorn bush and escaped to freedom. From a distance, the hunter watched in despair. He tried to pull the net, but the thorns held it tightly. His fingers were injured with each attempt, and he soon realized he was defeated. For the first time, he had nothing to take home. The feeling of defeat was bitter. Those little quails, so fragile alone, had become invincible by working together. As the sun began to set, the quails flew free, cutting through the sky. There was no more fear, no more insecurity. They had proven to themselves that, in unity, they had found the strength to defeat even the craftiest of hunters. For several days, the forest remained peaceful. The hunter had not returned to catch any quails, and the plan seemed to have worked perfectly. They were free. But with freedom came something unexpected. Pride began to seep into the hearts of some of them, like a silent poison. It all started innocently. One morning, while the quails gathered to search for food, one accidentally stepped on the head of another. "Hey!" exclaimed the offended quail, shaking her feathers. "Why did you step on me?" "It was an accident," replied the other. "No need to make such a fuss." But that apology wasn't enough. The offended quail puffed up her chest and retorted, "Oh, of course. I bet you think you're the only one who did something important in the plan, don't you? As if I hadn't lifted the net too." From there, things began to worsen. Other quails overheard the argument and soon started to take sides, each one wanting to prove that she had contributed more to the escape. "I was the one who lifted the net higher that day. You didn't put in that much effort," shouted one. "Oh, don't come at me with that. If it weren't for me, you all would have dropped the net on the first thorns," shot back another. What was once a united community was now beginning to shatter into petty squabbles and resentments. Each quail wanted to be recognized for her part in the escape, as if the flight could only have been possible thanks to her effort alone. The harmony that had kept them strong began to crumble. Meanwhile, the future Buddha watched it all from a distance, a sorrowful expression on his face. He knew this was the real test, more difficult than facing the hunter. The ability to set aside ego. In silence, he reflected, there is no safety for a wrangler. The moment they start competing against each other is the moment they will all be lost. He tried to speak to them, to warn them that without unity, they would face peril. But his words fell on deaf ears. The sound of their arguing drowned out any wisdom he had to offer. Each quail was more concerned with blaming the other than recognizing that the true enemy was not the companion next to her, but the hunter who was now waiting for the moment they would be completely divided. In that moment, the future Buddha made a painful decision. He knew that the unity had been shattered, and staying there would only bring more suffering. With one last look at those he had led to freedom, he spread his wings and flew away to another part of the forest, taking with him only those few who still believed in the importance of unity. The others were left behind, trapped in their petty disputes. They had no idea what was about to happen. As the quarrels among the quails intensified, the future Buddha felt the inevitable approaching. There was something ominous in the air, as if a storm were about to descend. He watched silently as each argument eroded the little trust that remained among them. A spark of pride had turned into a fire of resentment. He knew deep down that it was only a matter of time. They won't see the danger coming, he thought. The quails were so busy competing with one another, so obsessed with proving who had contributed more to the escape, that they wouldn't notice the hunter returning. He was out there, just waiting for the moment when they were completely divided. The future Buddha tried once more to speak to them, to explain that the path to freedom could not be walked alone, but no one would listen. The sound of their arguments drowned out his wisdom. "You think I need you to escape? Next time, I'll lift the net myself," shouted one quail in a mocking tone. "Oh, sure, as if you were the hero," replied another, full of sarcasm. The cooperation that had saved them was crumbling in the face of small injuries to their pride. He realized that there was nothing more to be done, not out of stubbornness, but because he understood that wisdom cannot be forced. Each must find it at the right moment. With a heavy heart, he opened his wings and looked back at the quails for the last time. Where there is no harmony, there is no salvation. With those silent words in his mind, he departed, taking with him only a small group that still believed in the power of unity. As they flew to another part of the forest, he felt a deep melancholy, but also a tranquil acceptance. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Behind him, the remaining quails were trapped in their own disagreements, unaware that the window to act in unity was closing. And that moment, he knew, was drawing ever closer. The hunter, tired and frustrated after days of failure, sensed that something had changed in the air. His instincts warned him the quails' unity wouldn't last forever. So, one morning, he grabbed his old net, filled his lungs, and released the treacherous whistle. Tweet, 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 tweet. The quails, still caught up in their arguments, heard the sound. Some looked sideways, suspicious. Others didn't care at all. After all, each believed that in the next capture, another quail would struggle to lift the net. Pride had clouded their judgment, and the idea of unity seemed a distant memory. When the hunter threw the net over them, there was no moment of connection, no perfect synchronization that had saved them before. Instead, they began to argue again. "Now it's your turn to lift," shouted one. "My turn? Only because you don't want to ruin your feathers? You do it," retorted another. They continued to bicker while the net tightened around them. One tried to move, but the other refused to cooperate. "If you want to escape, lift it yourself," yelled one quail in a tone of mockery. The hunter, seeing the scene, couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. The opportunity he had long awaited had finally arrived. Without further resistance, he easily grabbed the edges of the net and huddled them together, as if gathering ripe fruit from a low branch. The quails, powerless and arguing amongst themselves until the last moment, were all piled into the basket. As he walked home with the filled basket, the sound of their quarrels still echoed, muffled by the net. Each was more concerned with blaming the other than realizing that the real enemy was not the companion beside her, but the hunter who was now taking them to their end. The hunter walked home with ease, and when he reached his house, he placed the basket on the floor. His wife, who had been impatient after so many days of empty hands, finally smiled at the sight of the reward. "I told you it was just a matter of time," he murmured with satisfaction. "In the end, it's always like this. Just wait for them to start fighting." The hunter entered the house with a full basket and placed it before his wife, who smiled, satisfied. He had patiently waited for the right moment, and it arrived, just as it always does for those who know how to exploit division. Each captured quail represented more than just a success for the hunter. They were symbols of the disunity he knew would arise sooner or later. While he settled in with a sense of victory, the fate of the quails was sealed. They remained huddled together, tightly pressed beneath the net, some still exchanging furious glances, others in silence, digesting the bitter truth. It was only then, in that final moment, that they realized the magnitude of their error. Each argument, each accusation, every time they put pride above collaboration, all of that had led them into the basket. They had saved themselves once. They had come so close to building a life free of fear. But the freedom they had carefully conquered was lost due to their inability to maintain unity. And now, trapped, the only thing they could do was reflect on how they let ego destroy them. The future Buddha, in another part of the forest, knew when the tragedy unfolded. He felt the weight of the lesson learned too late. With a sigh, he accepted the truth. Not all battles are won with the first victory. The true struggle is against pride, and that battle must be fought every day. The story comes to an end, but the lesson remains. It is not the external enemy that defeats us, but the division among us. It is pride that separates us, and when we allow it to grow, even the greatest achievements can turn into ruin. Because unity is not a one-time achievement. It is a constant commitment, a daily reminder that we are stronger together than alone. Just like those quails, we all face invisible nets in life. Moments when we need to decide whether to act together or allow ego to drive us apart. The question this story leaves us with is simple yet powerful. Will we be wise enough to stay united when the next net falls? Thanks for watching. In this story, you learned about the Buddhist parable of the Quails and Fowler and the teaching that this text has to give us. Don't forget to click like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Share with your friends and leave your comments below about what you thought of this story. We always bring stories with lessons for modern life.